We are approaching the hottest time of the year. It's going to feel that way in a big way in the week ahead, and especially as we head into the weekend. Let's take a look at the overall 500 millibar height anomalies. And you can see we do, in fact, have a weakness in the ridge, and it's been fairly weak out there across the western regions of the U.S. Much of the Pacific Northwest and much of the West Coast has actually been on the somewhat cooler side. But as you swing towards the eastern areas, that's where you're going to start seeing those deeper reds and those higher temperatures and higher humidity as well, especially across the plains and much of the upper Midwest. In fact, we've got widespread heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, getting into the excessive heat watches, all the areas in orange, that is a heat advisory. You could be seeing feels like temperatures of 105 to 110 this afternoon. Once you get in the magenta color, that's where it can start getting dangerous. So those heat indices of the 110 to 115 range. So you can definitely see across Missouri, areas of Iowa, back into Illinois. Yeah, you could be approaching 110, 115, even some isolated areas of 120 is likely not out of the question, especially as we head into that Wednesday. But you can see where the ridge has been. That's on the northern periphery. That's where we're going to see the most activity. And overnight, we had a deluge of thunderstorms across Missouri, dumped about 6 inches of rain for them in and around St. Louis. So if you look at the satellite picture, couple things stand out. First, you got the Pacific Northwest. They're on that cooler side, so with the cooler, kind of chillier rain for them. And then the monsoonal flow has been alive and prevalent, especially for those areas into New Mexico. They've got isolated flash flood warnings for them. And you can definitely see where the ridge is underneath that sinking air, where you're going to have underneath those crystal blue skies. But just on the northern periphery of that, that's where you got the weakness of the ridge. And the conveyor belt of moisture brings some severe storms, but especially that heavy rain, which they saw in Missouri this morning into the overnight hours. And there's going to be another batch of energy that's likely going to impact Kentucky as well as Tennessee today. And then, believe it or not, this convection out here is actually at least the DNA, the remnants of what was 93L in the upper Gulf Coast just a couple of days ago. It swung all the way around. Now it's swinging back out into the open waters of the Atlantic. And most indications actually has this traversing across Florida again and up into the upper Gulf Coast states. So that's going to add more tropical moisture for them. So before today, here's where we stand. So of course, we've got the conveyor belt of the monsoonal flow that continues to be alive and prevalent out here in far west Texas, especially there into New Mexico on the eastern side of Colorado, western side of Kansas. And then we also have those storms that impacted Missouri overnight. Now sets up shop over Kentucky as well as into Tennessee. They're going to have their own flash flooding setups this afternoon as this conveyor belt of moisture sneaks down there into that neck of the woods as well as into the Carolinas. And then we're already seeing the start of some of that rain impacting Florida from that little tropical system out there off the southeast coast. And then that's going to swing across Florida tomorrow, likely with more heavy rain for them. And then on the northern periphery of the ridge again, we have another area of disturbed weather across the Dakotas. They saw some massive hail last night. It was about 6 inches in spots by Belfield. Man, it looked like it almost snowed up there in North Dakota. We could be looking at some of that action again, especially as we head into tomorrow. And then as we head into that Wednesday time frame, wow, look at this. It's all about the dew points this time of year. With all the rain around, especially across the southeast and much of the eastern states, we're going to see, humidity values. That's why we have such widespread, heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, excessive heat watches. It's really because of the dew points. And this is just nasty, folks. Anything above 70 is considered oppressive. And once you start getting to 80, that's just downright nasty. And it's going to be feeling like that in a big way. So that's going to be adding to that moisture content in the atmosphere atmosphere, and that's why we have those some dangerously heat indices, especially as we head into the afternoons. But we've got a lot of moisture available, once this low pressure center gets out in the open water. So it kind of hugs the coast. I mean, at times, especially along the beaches, don't be surprised to get some of those 1 to 2 inch per hour rainfall rates at times. Just big, fat, huge water droplets coming out of this atmosphere, especially along the coastal regions. So be under alert if you're along the beach or if you're on vacation there around the Florida Panhandle, going into Mississippi, Mobile, those areas across New Orleans. We are expecting some more heavy rain, due to this tropical type low feature that will be impacting your area. But look at the standout as we head into Wednesday afternoon. I mean, you can definitely see we've got excessive heat warnings, but it's a combination of not just the extra water content in the atmosphere and the higher humidity, the higher dew points, but also all the corn sweat that's happening up there into Iowa, back into Illinois. Those are extreme CAPE values, and it's getting that because it's actually picking up on the extra water vapor that the corn is releasing up in that atmosphere. So yes, these are definitely going to be overdone, but man, that's 8,000 range, folks. Yeah, that just adds fuel to the fire. So you got that combination, and that's why we can get some of those dew points in the low 80s. It's not out of the question, and that's why we have those excessive heat warnings already issued for that Wednesday timeframe, where we could be looking at heat indices, especially combining that corn sweat of 120. That is just some nasty stuff up there across Iowa and Illinois, and widespread. That's your 120 where it maxes out. Probably not out of the question. It's likely not overdone. So this is definitely one of those things that you got to take all the necessary precautions and stay hydrated in this stuff, because the heat can sneak up on you pretty quick, and especially if you get in those 10 o'clock through a 4 o'clock, say, peak heating time frames. So just be extra cautious, especially if you have to work outside up there. But as we head into Thursday, you can see where the ridge is, right? That's where you got all the sinking air, you got all the clearer skies, and all the white showing up on the map. Maybe basically doesn't have any rain associated with it. But then the conveyor belt of moisture starts with the monsoonal flow, and that goes up and over the ridge. Pretty typical for this time of year, and that's where the storm development is going to be. And then, of course, further south, that is our tropical low, or a tut low, they call it, down there across the Gulf Coast. They're going to be ringing out the atmosphere. Some of those tropical downpours in the heat of the afternoon will be swinging across. And by Friday, here's the temperature anomalies, and you can see where the rain is, basically where it rains, especially in the peak summer. Obviously, you're going to be on the cooler side because of all the extra clouds and the rain around, and that's where the remnants of 93L will likely end up on Friday afternoon. To the north of there, you're in that sinking air side. You'll be feeling the heat, and likely some triple digits there in Oklahoma and a good part of Texas by then, as that ridge of high pressure will slowly shift back off to the west and start parking itself over the Central Plains, while much of California continues to remain on the cooler side. So if you break it down for your work week ahead, much of the ridge is going to be locked and loaded across the east. Much of the central, eastern 2/3 of the U.S., well above average temperatures. And the feels like is a big way. That's the huge concern, is really the heat indices are going to be extreme this week, and especially as Wednesday onward, as the ridge will expand and as you have more water vapor in the atmosphere. That combination spells trouble, and that's why we're going to be seeing widespread heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, excessive heat watches. But as much of the Four Corners regions and most of the western regions aren't going to be in that action, right? They're going to be like, hey, it actually feels nice out here. It's not too bad, right? So just enjoy it while you have it. So overall, if you break it down over the next 5 days, as far as rainfall is concerned, yes, you are going to continue to remain on the drier side for much of the western periphery, besides some sporadic light showers at times across the Pacific Northwest. Once we get into that conveyor belt of moisture, tapping into those added CAPE values, the extra water content in the atmosphere, on all the northern periphery of that ridge, you're going to be seeing Widespread showers and thunderstorms, likely some severe storms, and some heavier rains across the Dakotas, Minnesota through Wisconsin. There's the monsoonal flow for New Mexico and Colorado. And there's the precipitation of what's to come from that tropical low. The Tut low will likely expand into the Carolinas through Georgia, going through Florida, and then along the I-10, I-20 corridor, but likely not make it into Texas because they'll be feeling that ridge of high pressure going to be over them by the time they head into Friday and Saturday of the week ahead. And it just gets more intense after that, folks. We're talking about extreme heat on the way. So this is not actual temperature. We're talking what feels like to the body for those areas. This is all the water vapor in the atmosphere, all the rain around that's been around lately. I mean, yeah, this is about a huge area of the lower 48 will be getting into this ridge of high pressure. The excessive heat warnings, heat advisories do expect multiple states, widespread, at least 10, 20, if not 25 states having some sort of heat advisory, excessive heat warning by the time we head into that July 26th through that August 1st. So extreme heat is on the way in a big way. And I don't really think once it sets up shop, it really doesn't go anywhere. There's nothing really to move this around. Of course, we'll be going into the end of July. We're going into the first part of August. Obviously, it's hot. It is summer, and it's peak summer, and it's basically doing exactly what summer does. It's hot, right? So just prepare for the heat and stay indoors, especially if you have to, take plenty of breaks, especially if you work outside in this heat, because it can be dangerous. And like I mentioned, it doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of expands from a 594 to a 597 millibar high pressure. That's going to be expanding. So once the ground dries out, basically those areas that have had a lot of rain and the drier areas across Oklahoma and say portions of a good part of Texas, they'll be drying out a lot by then. So expect those temperatures to be amping up in a big way combined with that heat indices. And that's when we'll see widespread, excessive heat warnings and watches and heat advisories were a good part of the lower 48. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.